300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on JJ Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Happy MLK Day to all of you. A fantastic wild card weekend in the NFL that is going to culminate tonight with the Rams and the Cardinals. Still some fluctuation in the seedings, in the draw. Can't wait to see how that all shakes out. But so many tremendous games, some blowouts, some close nail biters, and that's why I have to start with perhaps the most suspenseful and controversial ending of an NFL wildcard game this weekend. The Dallas Cowboys and the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers survived Big Dallas with a 23-17 victory over the Cowboys. The underdog, the road team, the 6th seed in the postseason, knocks off the 3 seed at home in just a frantic, wild finish in Dallas, filled with tons of suspense, tons of anxiety, just game of inches. It was absolutely a sensational, dramatic-filled postseason game and postseason end. And, of course, when you think about the 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys, these are 2 franchises that have each won 5 Super Bowls. So they're storied franchises. There's a storied rivalry, especially in the postseason between these 2 teams. I believe that 4 out of the last 5 times these 2 teams have faced off in the postseason, the team that won ended up winning the Super Bowl. And we obviously remember 1981, that epic finish in the NFC Championship game, the catch at Candlestick, Joe Montana to Dwight Pearson. Dwight Clark, sorry, I was thinking Drew Pearson, who hauled in the Hail Mary by Roger Staubach. That's what coined Hail Mary. But Dwight Clark in the end zone against the 49ers, or for the 49ers against the Cowboys, rather, at Candlestick. So there's so many great memories from that history, from that rivalry, from these historic franchises. And the odds makers told us before the game started what they expected and what they thought of these 2 teams. The Cowboys came into this game as 3-point favorites, which essentially is the odds makers saying that this game is a push, given the fact that home teams automatically receive 3 points. So that's what they told you of what they thought these 2 teams were and how they would match up against one another. But the 49ers really dominated for the majority of the game. They should have put the Cowboys away much earlier. They had ample opportunities to extend the lead, but they shot themselves in the foot, and they allowed the Cowboys opportunity after opportunity to climb back. When they took a 23-7 lead after Deebo Samuel took the pitch 26 yards for the touchdown. And by the way, Deebo Samuel, again, I talked about him last week. I've talked about him throughout this entire season. Just a tremendous Swiss Army knife. He just is an all back and all receiver type of player. You can line him up on the outside. Now we see Kyle Shanahan feature him a lot out of the running back position, which I'll touch on again in a moment, but he takes the pitch 26 yards for the touchdown. And all the momentum is with Dallas. And then Nick Bosa comes back, and it seems like Nick Bosa leaves the game with an injury. And then that's when everything starts to unravel a bit. And Jimmy Garoppolo, as much as I complimented him last week, and as well as I thought he played in the first half, he was completing a lot of big-time passes. The second half, he was really awful. I can't sugarcoat it. He missed some critical throws. He missed Brandon Ayuk for a touchdown on a third down pass, 3rd and 10. That really could have put the game, I think, out of reach. He threw a terrible interception that just got away from him. Now, that happens. Quarterbacks, sometimes the ball just gets away from them. But it was an untimely type of error that resulted in points for the Cowboys. And even a few plays prior to that pick, the 49ers nearly lost a fumble. There was a pass to George Kittle that looked like it was fumbled and then recovered by the Cowboys. The replay showed that it just hit the ground before Kittle was able to get a handle on it. But so many different opportunities. And then you look at the final 4 possessions for the San Francisco 49ers. These were their final 4 possessions. Punt, interception, punt, punt. Those are their final 4 possessions. And it truly epitomized kind of what this game was, what it came down to. And really, when you look at both sides, the final 4 possessions really epitomized NFL football, which is a game of inches. A game of inches. And we saw that on the 49ers' second to last possession. 3rd and 5, short pass over the middle, caught by Samuel. And Leighton Vander Esch just stonewalls Deebo Samuel and keeps him a yard short. It was a spectacular solo tackle that almost felt not quite like the game, but just about the game. If he gets that first down, it feels like the game is over. They stop him. It's 4th and 1. Shanahan opts to punt. Now, I thought that might have been too conservative of a play call. But then the Cowboys, they have an opportunity, and they're not able to move the ball down the field. And then on a 4th and 11, desperation heave by Dak Prescott, it was surprisingly a nearly perfectly thrown ball. And if Cedric Wilson just turns around his head, he probably makes the catch. He was a little late to track it and then made a diving attempt, but he couldn't swivel his head around in time to actually haul it in. And it was surprisingly, it hit his fingertips. And he had nowhere to go, Dak. He was falling back, just hoisted it up, and it was surprisingly right on the money, but they came up short. Those are a couple plays where you look back and you say, Dallas had an opportunity there. They couldn't move the ball down the field. And then on the 49ers' final possession, this was one of the most suspenseful, intense playoff games that we had. There weren't many close games. Most of these games were blowouts. This was one of them. And on the final possession, this was the game right here on 3rd and 9. Deebo Samuel gets the pitch, gets to the outside. He seems to have great blocking. And on first glance, looks like he is able to pick up the first down just barely. They rule on the field that it's a first down. You take a closer look, it looks to be a hair short. And then the refs take a replay, and they actually have to come out and say that the ruling on the field is that the refs are going to respot it. That was the official ruling, is a respot. They respot it like 2 inches short. It really is a game of inches in this instance. And on 4th and 2 inches, the game is in the hand for the 49ers. All they got to do is QB sneak it with Jimmy Garoppolo, who they've been 11 for 11 on QB sneaks this year, and to ice the game. They're going to ice the game. Their offensive lineman isn't set when they snap it. 5-yard penalty pushes them back. They got to punt it away. Dallas, no timeouts. A minute left. That's the game. And yet, despite how poorly the Cowboys played for the majority of the game. And despite the fact that they had no business or didn't deserve any right to be in this game whatsoever, they still had one glimmer of hope down the stretch and had an opportunity. They got the ball back with 32 seconds left at their own 20, no timeouts. And to their credit, they managed, along with the credit of the defense really for giving them ample chances, they managed to get all the way down to the 49ers' 41-yard line with 14 seconds left. Then obviously we know the controversial quarterback draw. McCarthy and Dak claimed that that was something they practiced, that was something they knew, but unfortunately it appeared like they couldn't get up to the line of scrimmage in time to spike it. The refs couldn't keep up with them, and the refs have to touch the ball to officially set it down before it can be snapped. And again, it was just kind of a frenetic play. The ref didn't quite catch up to Dak and to the offensive line and actually kind of barreled over Dak. Did it look like all of the Cowboys players were set to snap it? Yes, but it certainly was going to be close regardless. And that's kind of what the game ended up boiling down to, kind of obstructed his path. That was all she wrote. But the Cowboys, 14 penalties, 84 yards. The 49ers helped them greatly. They had 9 penalties for 58 yards. But the bottom line is Kyle Shanahan just outcoached Mike McCarthy. And that was clearly apparent in the way that the 49ers came out and played. They looked a lot sharper, especially right out of the gates. They played with a lot more emotion and a lot more focus and discipline, most importantly. Cowboys didn't really shake off the rust till Nick Bosa and Fred Warner kind of got injured midway or towards the end of the third quarter. And so, again, I give the Cowboys defense credit for coming up with enough stops to give their offense a chance. But this was more about the 49ers nearly losing this one and wasting this one away than it was the Cowboys, in my opinion. But then obviously the funny thing is you see all these Cowboys fans who are crying in the stands, or there's all these memes. And the only reason I say that this is funny is because they were crying with like 4 or 5 minutes left. The game wasn't over. Cowboys still had chances. And you could already see just the great deal of disappointment on the faces, just plastered on the faces of these Cowboys fans. And there's no question about it, given the expectations that not only they had set for themselves, but that we had for them, given the season that they had. Yes, they were a disappointment. They came up grossly short of what we had expected from them. But at the same time, to suggest that this is also a huge upset by the 49ers, I think is being a little disrespectful to the 49ers. When you look at their personnel, and we said entering the season, their personnel stacks up with some of the best in the NFL. Their front four is tremendous. Their talent level, I think, could potentially equal, if not surpass, the talent of Dallas. So it is an upset. But I also think, and so for that reason, yes, we should be disappointed in the Cowboys, but I also think the 49ers have just been a good team when they're healthy. They just haven't been healthy all year. And I think that's partly the problem. Okay. And speaking of the NFL Wild Card weekend, there are a couple other games I want to touch on. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Chiefs destroyed the Steelers again. It was the second time that they've just manhandled them physically and psychologically. Really over the last 3 weeks, they blew them out in week 16, 36-10. So we knew that the Chiefs were the better team. That's what we knew. Nothing surprised us there. The question was, how would Pittsburgh's offense be able to play? Would they be able to push the ball down the floor? Would they be able to actually execute enough plays to give their defense enough energy, enough juice to try and keep up with this Chiefs offense? That's what this game came down to. That's what we knew it would come down to, because as great as their defense is and can be, would the offense be sputtering? That was the biggest question mark. And when you look at the start of the game for the Steelers, they couldn't have started the game any better. First quarter, tied 0-0. Scoop and score by TJ Watt to take a 7-0 lead. The problem was the Pittsburgh Steelers offense couldn't capitalize on the early Chiefs' empty trips. They just couldn't. They simply couldn't. And the Steelers punted on their first 7 possessions. If you punt on your first 7 possessions against the Kansas City Chiefs, you are practically begging to lose the game. It also doesn't help when who should have been your most reliable receiver, Deontay Johnson, dropped a bunch of critical third down slants over the middle, just short, easy balls through his hands. I understand the temperature's colder, but not an excuse at this time of the season. And so they just kept shooting themselves in the foot time and time again. And the Steelers just could not push the ball down the floor. They only had one pass go for over 7 yards in the first half. They only had one completion of 20-plus yards. And only 4 times did they complete a pass 10-plus yards in the game. So obviously from an intriguing, an interesting, and entertaining standpoint, the Chiefs were always the much more favorite type of pick to make. Would be the better choice. That's what we know from that standpoint. And in a lot of ways, we also knew what we'd get from the Steelers offense, which is a very predictable, mostly anemic offense. That's typically who they have been and what they have shown. And despite all of that, despite the fact that the Chiefs were clearly going to be the better team, despite the fact that all the X's and O's favored the home side, I still found myself very conflicted watching this game. Because on one hand, I found myself really torn because I wanted to root for Big Ben and the Steelers just because, for sentimental reasons, anytime you see a legend, and I have so much respect and appreciation for legends in any sport, you see a guy in Big Ben who's likely going to retire, although he hasn't officially announced it, and you see the Steelers and Mike Tomlin and that brand, but especially for Ben Roethlisberger, you just want to root for them. Even though it's not pretty, he doesn't look good when it comes to athletes on a football field. But the respect level that is clearly there is the reason why I found myself partly rooting for Big Ben, just to see this kind of last dance continue, to see how long it could last. And while that was pulling a part of me, the other side was pulling my appreciation and affinity for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and just how explosive their offense is, how talented this team is. And that's the thing about them is, especially on offense, their offense is so much predicated on the confidence and the swagger that they play with. This is almost like watching the Harlem Globetrotters of the NFL. The only difference is the Harlem Globetrotters in the basketball world, they would intentionally showcase and flaunt their elite handles and their dribbling display and their incredible vision and passing ability. That was all intentional. That was deliberate. The Kansas City Chiefs, their kind of eccentricity and their electric and stylish plays on offense, that's not forced. That's simply who they are. That's simply the creativity of their coaching staff, the confidence that they have in their players and their personnel on offense shining through. So when they go to that underhand touchdown toss to Jerick McKinnon, when Patrick Mahomes throws a short just jump pass to their guard, Nick Allegretti, when Travis Kelce executes a touchdown pass from 2 yards out to Byron Pringle, they're not doing that simply to show off, simply to act like an arrogant, entitled group. Even if people interpret it that way, they execute that because those are the plays that they legitimately practice. That Andy Reid, that Eric Bieniemy, that coaching staff, that offense truly feels comfortable doing, because they truly think this is the best play call at that particular moment. not what's going to garner the most oohs and ahs on social media or from the crowds later. And I think that's one of the big reasons why they're so fun to watch. It's just because they've got that creativity. And for all the problems that we have said have plagued this team all year, and I still am not sure whether or not it's just a matchup advantage versus they've truly woken up out of the slump on offense that they had allegedly had, because against the Raiders and the Steelers, their offense has been a well-oiled machine. Regardless, they've been clicking. Patrick Mahomes was sensational yesterday, over 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, was in control, was distributing the football beautifully, and just a great job of getting multiple guys involved in the offense. That's when they're at their best. And it's amazing that this team doesn't score a single point for the first 25 minutes of the game, and then the final 5 minutes of the first half, they score 3 touchdowns. That's how quickly they can strike. And you have to give credit to the defense, because since week 6, weeks 1 through 5, they were the worst rated defense in the NFL. Gave up 32 points per game. From week 6 on through week 18 into this postseason, their defense has only given up 16 points per game, which has been one of the best in the NFL. And it's great to see. So on the one hand, it's a little bittersweet to see Big Ben go home, but at the same time, I'm excited and encouraged by what I've been seeing from the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think they're really starting to peak into form. And next week's matchup against the Buffalo Bills is going to be fun to watch. I can't wait to watch that one next Sunday night. And that's a perfect segue into that other AFC Wild Card matchup, the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots. The Bills just blitzed the Patriots 47-17, 47 points on Bill Belichick's defense. That's the most amount of points that he's ever given up as a head coach of the New England Patriots. And this is interesting because this was kind of dubbed the trilogy. This was a rubber match between two teams with great familiarity with one another, foes in the AFC East. Now, the difference is typically when you hear the term trilogy in a rubber match, it's highly anticipated because it's involving two fighters who are very familiar with one another, getting back into the ring, getting back into the octagon for the third time. The difference is with the Patriots and the Bills, it's one thing to feel like you have familiarity with one another. It's another thing when you have literally faced this team over 300 times. And since Josh Allen has been the quarterback, the Patriots and the Bills have matched up at least 8 to 9 times. They play each other automatically twice every single season. So it just so happens that this particular year, they faced off for a third time in the postseason. But this is going back to 4 years of facing off against one another twice every single season. There was so much familiarity already built in to this matchup. So it was highly anticipated, but it was almost as if there was too much familiarity for each team's. It was almost too much good stuff for each team because you have so much tape, you have so much you can turn back to, that this was really going to come down to heart. It was going to come down to guts and determination. And to me, this was clearly about I'm getting, of course, a random call in the middle. Apologies for that. So this really came down to the Buffalo Bills making it crystal clear and sending a message that they are and were the clearly better team versus the New England Patriots all season. It wasn't just about Saturday. This was about erasing any doubt whatsoever as to who was the better team between these two teams, because we obviously know that the Patriots edged them out narrowly at Orchard Park 14-10. Earlier in the year, it was brutal snow, wind conditions. The Patriots ran the football 46 times. They only passed it 3 times. The defense was maligned, was embarrassed. They were just ripped to shreds for their inability to stop the run. That was lingering in the backs of their minds. And obviously they were able to avenge that loss to some degree at Gillette Stadium later in the season when they won 33-21. Josh Allen was spectacular in that outing. But the point was they had faced that kind of embarrassment. And there were these pundits and critics that claimed, well, the AFC East still belongs to Bill Belichick after that win. And can we really fully turn the keys over to Josh Allen and the Bills? Are they ready to assume that role, to usurp the Patriots? There were still lingering questions. And they put a nail in that coffin on Saturday. They left, again, absolutely no doubt whatsoever. And this was probably the best game that I think the Buffalo Bills have ever played in the Josh Allen era. He was absolutely sensational. I mean, they pounced on the Patriots so fast, right out of the gates. It was almost like the beginning of a bullfight, except the Bulls stampeded into the arena and then trampled the Matadors. The Matadors didn't even have a chance. They knocked them out all the way in the first half. It was 27-0 and then 27-3 at the end of the first half. They had the Bills had gained 300 yards of offense, 19 first downs in the first half. And clearly they weren't going to let up in the second half. And Josh Allen, to his credit, I think he played his best game as an NFL pro. 21 of 25, only 4 incompletions, over 300 yards, 5 passing touchdowns, no interceptions, a nearly perfect QBR, 98. That's out of this world incredible. You don't see that. And his ability to, what was impressive about Josh Allen was not only his ability to extemporize, but to stay calm and composed and keep his eyes downfield the entire time. Because there are a lot of quarterbacks that scramble, but they get a little bit flustered. They lose track of where their wide receivers are. And that touchdown pass to Dawson Knox early in the game, where he is flushed out of the pocket, escapes one tackle, is still tiptoeing towards the sideline, unfazed, just softly throws it towards the back of the end zone, and his big tight end goes up and get it. Tremendous play. Tremendous throw. And he's also a really great runner with the football. He is surprisingly fast for a guy that size. He's a tough guy to bring down. He's about 6'5", 6'6", 250, 260. That is a grown man at the quarterback position that's chugging down the field. So I was impressed with him. The defense was sensational. I think that if you look at the Patriots' overall offensive stats, they're a little bit misleading, given the fact that a lot of it was garbage yards in the second half and in the fourth quarter when the game was completely out of reach. That leaping snatch of an interception by Micah Hyde in the first quarter, because I actually thought Mac Jones, especially early on, he didn't play that poorly. His wide receivers just let him down. They missed some catches, but not that time. Micah Hyde had a tremendous interception in the end zone. They intercepted Jones twice. They sacked him 3 times. They bottled up the wide receivers. They were physical at the line of scrimmage. They were great. And obviously the temperatures were freezing. I know a lot about cold temperature going to Wisconsin. Apparently it was 0 degrees at one point. It felt like minus 32 with wind chill. Again, I'm familiar with that type of weather. It's not fun, to say the least. And yet Josh Allen, with his big arm, unrattled. That's part of the reason they drafted him, was to be able to throw through those inclement weather conditions, and he did. And now it sets up what's going to be the ultimate rematch in the divisional round against the Chiefs. Obviously, they manhandled the Chiefs earlier in the year, but now this is the divisional round. They lost to them in the AFC Championship game last year, and the Bills and the Chiefs next week. It's going to be fascinating because both of these two teams seem to be hitting on all cylinders at the right time, and they seem to be clicking right before they're about to face off against one another. But a big shout out to Josh Allen and the Bills. Again, I think in the Josh Allen Buffalo Bills era, this is the most impressive that they've played collectively as a team. And again, they've had some tremendous games. I think all of them pale in comparison to what they did on Saturday night. Absolutely tremendous. Big congrats to them. I want to transition to the NBA for a second. A couple interesting topics in the NBA. So LeBron, the Lakers star, tweeted an apology yesterday and basically tweeted an apology to Lakers fans for the poor play executed by the Lakers. And this obviously comes on the heels of their embarrassing and humiliating road loss to the Denver Nuggets, where they lost by 37 points, 133 to 96. LeBron tweeted hashtag Laker Nation. I apologize, and I promise we'll be better. Let me first say that this is one of the reasons why people love and admire and really respect LeBron James as a leader of a franchise, is because of the accountability of his own play, absolving the accountability of his teammates, shouldering all the blame anytime either he plays poorly, the team plays poorly, his players play poorly, whether it's his fault or not. That's one of the reasons why players respect LeBron, why most of his former teammates absolutely adore him and laud him. But the thing about this instance is there's no question that the Lakers, yes, they should be issuing an apology to Lakers fans. They've played extremely poorly for over half the season, and that's reflected in their record, 21-22. But the person who should be issuing that apology should not be LeBron James. As much as I admire, as much as he is a great ambassador of the game of basketball, as much as he is the ideal leader of a franchise, leader of the Lakers, and the face of that franchise, it is not his responsibility in this instance to be issuing an apology on behalf of their entire season. If he wants to say after that poor performance against the Nuggets that he wants to assume responsibility for their lack of effort, fine. Although a poor outing for LeBron against the Nuggets resulted in 25 points, 9 rebounds, and 31 points. But if he wants to take responsibility for that individual loss, okay. Although to be fair, most teams always come out lethargic against the Denver Nuggets in the Mile High City. Because of the change in altitude, they have less stamina than they otherwise would in a lower altitude climate. So that's first of all. But the thing is, his play has been outstanding this year. It's been outstanding this year, let alone the fact that it's his 19th season. He's averaging 29 points, second most in the NBA, the third highest of his career. The only time he scored higher than that was during his first stint with the Cleveland Cavaliers in his first go-around in the NBA, his first 7 years in the league, averaging 7.5 rebounds, 6.5 assists, a steal and a half a game, over a block a game, 37 minutes in his 19th season, 52%. 52%, and he's shooting a respectable 76% from the free throw line. So he's doing his part. He is doing his part. 19 times has he scored over 30 points this year of 43 games. There was one time he had a streak of 7 30-plus point performances this very season. So the problem with him coming out and making this declaration now, it's not really a problem, but the issue that I have is the game on Saturday night was more of a one-off to me because it was due to a lack of effort. And I honestly don't think that the vast majority of the Lakers' losses this year have been as a result of a lack of effort. They've been simply because of poor execution down the stretch. Guys turning it over, missing shots. There have been a myriad of other kind of miscellaneous errors that have occurred down the stretch of games that have cost them games. But it wasn't always for a lack of effort. There have only been a few games this year where the Lakers truly were just outworked. We saw twice, bizarrely, against the Minnesota Timberwolves. They lost by 24 at home. They lost on the road to the T-Wolves. That's the game that AD went down. They lost to Boston on the road at TD Garden by 22 points. They lost to the Spurs like 138 to 110, some bizarre 28-point margin at home. Those are the only instances where they've truly been outplayed. So LeBron's been a revelation this year. He shouldn't have to assume any of this responsibility. If there was someone who should be issuing an apology to Lakers fans who do deserve an apology for the poor play, it's Frank Vogel and his coaching staff for clearly not eliciting the most and the best out of his players. It should be Russell Westbrook for still not taking responsibility and holding himself accountable for the frequent turnovers that he commits every single game. It should be Anthony Davis for his inability to be available, for his unavailability. Those are the people that should be issuing an apology if someone is going to do that. Magic Johnson ripped them for their effort against the Nuggets. And I don't have a problem with that. And I don't have a problem for LeBron wanting to take responsibility for the game against the Denver Nuggets, but for him to be the one to tweet out the apology, that's not his responsibility. He's done his job and then some. That responsibility should fall on Frank Vogel and the coaching staff, on Westbrook, on AD. Those are the people that should be issuing an apology. I'm not going to get mad at Talen Horton-Tucker for averaging 10 points a game, even though I think he should be averaging more because he's shooting poorly. I'm not going to get mad at Austin Reeves for occasionally getting cold when he's been perhaps the second most consistent player. I'm not going to be upset with Carmelo Anthony at age 37 for dropping buckets in about half the games he plays. I'm not going to put that onus on them. So, I appreciate the fact that, and this is one of the reasons why LeBron is who he is because he's carried the mantle not only as an elite player, but also as a leader of a team when it comes to the responsibility. But again, I just don't think that in this instance, it's necessarily required for him to do that. And I think there's no question that so far, trading for Westbrook has been a mistake more so than a success. Still holding out hope something can change, but that's what's happened at this point. So, final NBA topic. This was it. This was hysterical to me. So Cade Cunningham, the Detroit Pistons #1 selection in this past year's NBA draft, was ejected last night against the Phoenix Suns. I'm sure most people weren't watching this game, but if you were, the Phoenix Suns were destroying the Detroit Pistons. They've had a brutal season so far. They're 10-32, second worst record in the NBA and in the Eastern Conference. So there haven't been many things to celebrate or to cheer for in Detroit when it comes to the Pistons this year. It's been a brutal season, and they were getting blown out by the Phoenix Suns again. They lost like 135 to 108. But midway through the third quarter, Cade Cunningham, who's actually been having a pretty good rookie season, all things considered, averaging 15.5 points, about 6 rebounds, 5 assists. His shooting percentage is a little bit low, but he was having one of the best games of his career as an NBA player. Who he had 21 points, 4 assists, 9 of 15 shooting. And after he takes on 2 Phoenix Suns defenders, baseline, nasty reverse jam on nearly 2 guys. And immediately after that, he points either to the bench, to the crowd, to someone, doesn't bark anything, doesn't mouth anything, and the ref tees him up. That's his second technical. He's ejected from the game. It was the most bogus, ridiculous technical foul that I've seen in the NBA. And there have been, at least this year, there have been so many just head-scratching technical fouls. And the worst part about it is when you watch the replay, I'd understand if the ref said to themselves, okay, vicious dunk. He points to the Phoenix Suns bench, and it's a form of overt taunting. Disrespectful, maybe he's pointing to the ref. I'd understand teeing someone up for that. But when you look at the replay, what makes it so egregious is if he is, in fact, pointing to a bench, it's his own bench. It's the Detroit Pistons bench. The Pistons players are getting up. Now, he even came out and said he was pointing to his friends and family in the stands that were in attendance supporting him. But whether or not the refs wanted to believe it, if they did think, in fact, he was pointing to a bench, he was pointing to the Detroit Pistons bench. Why would you tee up a guy who's getting fired up to his own bench? That makes absolutely no sense to me. It was absolutely ridiculous. And again, this is a guy who just scored a career-high 29 points in a win over the Utah Jazz not too long ago. He was on pace to do that, it looked like, again yesterday. He had 21 points midway through the third quarter. He was having a great game. He was balling out. And again, Detroit hasn't had much to cheer for. And their number one pick who's balling, you toss him for showing a little emotion when he really, again, he wasn't even barking. He wasn't even talking smack to the refs, to the Suns. He just pointed to his bench or to his fans, didn't say a word, trotted back down to the other end of the floor, and he receives his second tee. He received one tee, one prior technical, so obviously the second one warranted the automatic ejection, but I just couldn't believe that you're going to throw this guy out for this. So the NBA's got to take a closer look. I want to see if they're going to revoke it now that they've had some time away from the play. But again, just give the Pistons a little bit of love. Cunningham's actually been playing pretty well. Didn't deserve that technical foul. Had a great dunk. There's no business for him to get tossed for that. Personally, I just don't see it. I didn't think so. Okay. Final topic before my Malkin's moment. So this has been an ongoing and developing story. Novak Djokovic versus the country of Australia. That's really been the storyline in the tennis world. Obviously, the 2022 Australian Open just got underway yesterday, I guess, because of the time change in Australia. It started out Monday Australian time. Sunday, obviously, in the United States. So Djokovic lost out on his second visa appeal and therefore has been officially prohibited from competing in the 2022 Australian Open. So he's not going to be able to defend his title. He's won the tournament 3 straight years. He's won it a record 9 times. He's obviously tied for the most men's singles Grand Slams with Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal with 20, although Rafael Nadal is actually playing in this Australian Open. He won his first round match yesterday. He's the only current player in the draw to have won the Australian Open before. So this was a really interesting story to watch because I think it really could have set a precedent moving forward as to the true leverage, the true cachet, the true power of prominent individuals in countries and whether or not they can circumvent the rules. And obviously Djokovic, his visa was initially canceled because of the lack of a medical exemption. He was denied a medical exemption for his vaccination status to play. Then he appealed it, got it appealed, so he was no longer detained. And again, initially the tournament's position was that he had been granted a medical exemption, but then the government stepped in, they intervened, and the Australian immigration minister denied his visa and said that it was a public safety hazard for him to remain in Australia because it was stoking and sparking all kinds of outrage in Australia. And then 3 federal courts ended up corroborating and affirming that minister's decision. So that's why Novak Djokovic right now isn't playing in this year's Australian Open. He tried to appeal it and it lost. Now, I'm not here to push any agenda. I'm not here to encourage or to discourage people to get vaccinated. That's their choice. But for Novak Djokovic, to look at himself in the mirror and say, the reason I'm not competing in this year's Australian Open, the reason why I am depriving myself of a golden opportunity to win a record-setting Grand Slam is because of my personal ego, because of my personal sense of entitlement. That's what it is. I don't really have much sympathy for Novak Djokovic in this instance because he's known all along what Australia's position has been. They are one of the most stringent countries when it comes to COVID-19. They have enforced some of the most punitive measures, whether it's travel restrictions, whether it's public gatherings, whether it's laws for its own citizens. They've been one of the harshest countries for Novak Djokovic, and he is perhaps arguably the greatest tennis player to have ever played. And I have so much appreciation for Novak Djokovic on the tennis court, what he represents for the sport, what he means for the game of tennis, how much value he has added and brought to the sport, not only for me, but for tennis fans in general. That does not get lost in the shuffle. But with that being said, I respect the fact that the country of Australia said, we value public health, and public health takes precedence over one individual man. I respect that position. And so none of this should really come as a shock to him. And the shame for Novak Djokovic is that, again, he is missing out on a golden opportunity. There's no Federer in this tournament. Nadal is playing in his first Grand Slam and his first real tournament in 6 months. So I don't know how his conditioning is. Who knows how healthy he is coming into this tournament. And because of Djokovic's off-the-court problems, and sometimes on-the-court problems, we saw again in the U.S. Open how he cost himself a title when he hit a line judge in the throat with the ball out of frustration. He's just shooting himself in the foot. And again, I've always maintained the position that people can choose whether or not they want to get vaccinated, but I've always thought that athletes in any sport, that they should be vaccinated because the number of people that they interact with, the fans, the media, the different cities that they're traveling to constantly, for athletes, it's the most pragmatic and prudent thing to do to get vaccinated. We've seen across other sports how much it can hamper a team's ability to win. In the NFL, with the Minnesota Vikings, Kirk Cousins, the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings, couldn't play in their biggest game of the year against the Packers that would have kept them in the playoffs because he tested positive for COVID. And the quarantine time for him was a lot longer, was 10 days versus just 4 or 5 days if you were vaccinated. So he wasn't able to be there for his team. Kyrie Irving, we've seen in the NBA. He's costing his team because he can only play in road games, which even the road games was a stance that the Nets just kind of capitulated to. He can't play in home games. Who knows how that's going to impact the team moving forward in the postseason, especially now that Kevin Durant is gone for 4 to 6 weeks. That's costing his team. So the point is, there are more negatives I'd say really there are more positives than negatives when it comes to athletes getting vaccinated, but you can do more damage if you don't get vaccinated just because you can't always be present. And we also don't know how it's going to impact his ability to play in future tournaments. The French Open in France at Roland Garros. France just announced that people are going to need to show proof of vaccination. There's going to be a proof of vaccination requirement to enter France. So now that's another Grand Slam that he likely won't be able to compete for at this very moment in time. That tournament takes place in May. I have a hard time believing that France is going to move off that stance in 5 months. Wimbledon in England, the UK, they're one of the harshest countries right now when it comes to COVID restrictions. Are they going to balk? Are they going to buckle for Novak Djokovic? I don't think so. Who knows what the U.S. Open, how the U.S.'s stance might or may or may not change. I'm not sure. So if you're Novak Djokovic and you're looking at the Grand Slam landscape right now and you're saying, okay, I don't want to get vaccinated, you might just cost yourself opportunities to set his to break history. That's what's going on. He might just cost himself chances at a Grand Slam. And maybe it's worth it for him. Maybe it's not. If he truly, if winning Grand Slams is truly his number one priority, then he's doing himself a disservice by not getting vaccinated. Because right now we're seeing the effects of his decisions. And so setting aside, personal beliefs about what he thinks about the vaccination, the pragmatic thing to do for him is to get vaccinated just so that he can simply play in the tournaments. Because again, I have a hard time imagining that France and potentially England or the UK are going to quiver and turn a blind eye to Novak Djokovic, especially after the stance that Australia took. I just have a hard time believing that's going to happen. And the French Open, the Australian, or the Wimbledon, those tournaments are fast approaching. And I think he should really look at himself in the mirror and decide whether or not this is truly the best decision for him. I'm not sure it is. And finally, my last topic, Malkin's moments. I have some great Malkin's moments for you on a tremendous wild card weekend in the NFL, along with some others. The Cincinnati Bengals collected their first playoff win since 1981. It was a tremendous win for that city over 31 years, or actually 1990, not 1981. I realized 1981 was that NFC Championship game that I was touching on at the top of the show between the 49ers and the Cowboys. The Cincinnati Bengals won their first playoff game since 1990. First playoff win in 31 years after they beat the Las Vegas Raiders 26-19 in the wild card game. It ended the longest active drought among the four major professional sports: NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLB. And the Bengals head coach, Zach Taylor, actually gifted a local bar a game ball delivered. I think it was called the Mount Lookout Tavern, local bar in Cincinnati. He gave them a game ball just to show his appreciation, small token of his appreciation for the city coming out in droves to cheer on and root for this team that hadn't been in the postseason in so long. So major shout out to them. Big shout out to Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen set a franchise playoff record for the most touchdown passes thrown in a game. He threw 21-25, 300 yards, 5 touchdowns, no turnovers whatsoever. I think it was the best game that I've seen Josh Allen play in his career. Obviously, it came en route to an absolute annihilation of their AFC East Division foe, the Patriots, 47-17. Buffalo became the NFL's first team in the Super Bowl era to score on each of its 7 possessions that didn't end with a kneel down. It's never been done before. That's how effective, that's how productive they were the entire game. It was absolutely sensational. The margin of defeat was the largest in the playoffs against Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots since he's taken over in 2000. And the 30-point margin of victory and the 47-point score for the Buffalo Bills were the second most by the Bills in a playoff game, behind a 51-3 win over the Los Angeles Raiders in the AFC Championship game in 1991. So that's how dominant that the Bills were in that outing against the Patriots. Couple others: Los Angeles Kings athletic, or actually this is the final Malkin's moment. The Los Angeles Kings NHL team, their athletic trainer, Aisha Visram, made history last Thursday when the Kings beat the Pittsburgh Penguins 6-2. She became the first woman to work a regular season NHL game as an athletic trainer behind the bench that we have ever seen. So big shout out to her. And this isn't a Malkin's moment. This is just a PSA and a major shout out to Chris Everett, the tennis legend and the legend tennis broadcaster. She just announced that she diagnosed stage 1 ovarian cancer. Just wanted to send my thoughts and prayers and best wishes to her, hoping for a healthy and speedy recovery. Chris Everett, one of the greatest female tennis players, not only in the U.S. history, but in the history of tennis. She's been an incredible role model, an incredible tennis broadcaster. It's good news that it's stage 1, that they caught it early. But regardless, just sending my best wishes to her and hope that she can battle and get through this. So major shout out to her as well. All right, that's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for watching Morning Joe right here on JJ Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter, Jonah Malkin, or at morning_Joe_JMalk97 on Instagram, and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. Well, that'll do it for me. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.